The White Sox arguably had their most impressive victory of the season. Let's discuss Chicago dominating Kansas City on today's episode of Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, lifelong Sox fan, a contributor for SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fan Side of the Network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. Additionally, follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. The White Sox blanked the Royals 7-0 last night, and in the process may have played their best game all season. Thanks in part to a few things that I want to discuss in the first segment. Then let's discuss if the White Sox trying to avoid 100 losses this season is a sign of improvement or just how bad things still are for the White Sox. And then I'll tackle the own mailbag questions. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now. All right, so what I loved about last night's win was Shane Smith is back, baby. He's back to being the all-star pitcher we saw in April and May. You know, the players who got hits were all players who theoretically could be on the next good team for the White Sox. So it was nice to see the young emerging core produce at the plate. There was amazing effort on the base pass and defensively that hopefully becomes a calling card on the next good team. And you could make the case that this was the best game the White Sox have played all season. I mean, even MLB.com's White Sox beat reporter Scott Merkin suggested it. You know, he tweeted that out. And I was like, you know what? You're right, Scott. And he's watched the team probably just as much as me, probably just as much as anybody. And what I also loved was the group responded by trouncing the Royals after Kansas City destroyed the Palhos in their ballpark last weekend. I mean, think about it. I did a show 2 Fridays ago about how I was dreading the White Sox going to Kauffman Stadium because it was a house of horrors. And then every day, as you might recall, I did a show on Monday, last Monday, going over just how bad that series went. Fast forward, and I know it's one game, but hey, wins are still not happening regularly, so you got to enjoy them when they happen. And this one, you fast forward, and you see basically, total, utter domination of the Royals. You see a great performance, especially for Shane Smith. He's back to being that dominant pitcher that impressed us all in April and May, that earned him an all-star nod, even though he had a terrible June and an equally bad early July. Still got into the all-star game with an ERA over 4. I remember people saying, this might be the worst player the White Sox have ever sent to the all-star game. Since what? That guy they sent in, I think, 1942? But when the stuff is going good, the stuff is impressive. And it was. Now, he technically allowed 2 base runners. The Royals, on a whole, had 3 because of an error. But think about that. 3 base runners. He pitches a 7-inning, 1-hitter. Strikes out 3, walks 1. And what is the impressive part was he got a ton of weak contacts because, again, 3 strikeouts. So it wasn't missing a ton of bats, but he was getting a ton of weak contact. And the ball was dancing. You know me, I love it when the ball's jumping around, moving. I mean, he was featured again on Pitching Ninja. For those that are not following Pitching Ninja, I suggest following him, whether it's on Instagram or Twitter. And there's Shane Smith, right back where he was normally, he was pretty much a regular in April and May because he was taking the baseball world by storm. Who is this guy? Probably one of the best Rule 5 picks ever, potentially. And it looked like it did in April and May. Just completely dazzling. And think about this. Since coming off the 15-day IL on April 1st after that sprained ankle. Wink, wink, nod, nod. I mean, maybe he did sprain his ankle. I just think they had to find a way to give him some rest. He's had 2 shutout performances and has a 2.63 ERA. He just logged his longest outing in his career yesterday. So clearly, he just needed some rest to recharge his batteries. And I'm fine with him being pulled after 80 pitches because remember, one of the reasons why the guy I think clearly hit a bump in the road in June and July was he was getting near his career innings. Remember, he threw no more than 94 2/3 innings in the minors when he was with the Brewers, and he's now over it. And I'd rather have him basically be on a pitch count rather than an innings limit like the team did with Garrett Crochet. Because remember, only allowing him to pitch 4 innings kind of put the White Sox at a disadvantage because then it meant the bullpen had to cover 5 innings last year, and the bullpen was terrible last year. So by putting him on a pitch count, you allow him to at least, if he's effective, get through, he can still eat up plenty of innings if he's effective. And then also, though, I don't know if this was more of a pitch count thing. This was, Will Venable did say after the game, one of the reasons why he was pulled after 80 pitches was it was the 4th time through the order. Didn't really want to risk the potential of Royals hitters getting some hits in that instance. Because, again, the modern thinking is usually the 3rd time through is when offenses start to erupt. First at bat, you're just trying to see what it is. The stuff is. 2nd at bat, you're trying to get the timing. 3rd at bat, you're going to try to crush the ball. 4th at bat, you definitely could do some damage potentially. So they just wanted to, pull him at that point. And you also had Brooks Baldwin chasing down a fly ball in left to make an amazing grab in terms of providing support to get outs. You just had tremendous effort. Like you had Miguel Vargas hustling down the base paths for 2 doubles. One of them he did. His hustle turned a single into a double. I mean, it was hit to the gap, but the Royals defender gets there pretty quick. And there's Miguel Vargas sprinting as fast as he can. And everyone defensively seemed engaged. And while TWTW, the will to win, is very limited in baseball, effort is important. And that TWTW is important on the base pass and in the field. And remember, one of the reasons last decade's rebuild failed was, the lack of effort in those 2 areas. Remember, I can't play today. My legs hurt. Well, you're potentially injury prone. Well, if you hit a grounder to first or grounder to short, you don't need to run it out. I mean, that was literally what was being told. And so far, we are seeing a team that is willing to try for the extra base, that is willing to go first to third. They're willing to try. And I hope the next good team shows the effort that we saw last night consistently. And in terms of leading the way, it was the rookies and the young vets. Luis Robert Jr. and Michael A. Taylor were the only 2 to not reach base. Everyone else in the lineup who has the possibility to be on the next competitive team made an impact at the plate. For your potential stars, Edgar Caro. He drives in Chase Mydroth for the first run of the game. Chase Mydroth would be more of your raised floor player, but he gets a hit. For your raised floor supporting players, Vargas and Lenyn Sosa. They had multi-hit games. Vargas also had a run. Sosa had 2 RBIs in a run. Curtis Mead is making his case to be added to the core with a multi-hit game. He's got a 333 average and a 750 OPS over his past 7 games. Get this guy more at bats. And then potential reserves on the next competitive team came up huge. Corey Lee and Brooks Baldwin. They smacked solo home runs in the 4th. Lee also had a multi-hit game. The only thing missing was Colson Montgomery and Kyle Teal getting in on the action, but they were given the day off. And in this case, there's nothing wrong with giving young guys still adjusting to the big leagues a day off here and there. But you see guys coming up big time to help, like Baldwin and Lee, to help the Sox vanquish a division foe who's had their number, especially at Kauffman Stadium. I mean, think about it. The White Sox were outscored 15-5 last week. They just blew past their run production. They didn't roll over and die. Well, the victory also draws the team closer to 63 wins, the magic win total to avoid a 3rd straight 100-loss season. Although it's trying to avoid another 100-loss season a sign of improvement or just how sad things have become in the big picture? Let's discuss after the break. Today, August 26th, is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP or eyeing a long shot division winner or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ, before week one even kicks off, this is your moment. And I'm hearing lots of folks go with Joe Burrow as the MVP. And while I love for it to be Caleb Williams, I still think Josh Allen will have a big season again and win the honors. I would also love to see Buffalo win it all, since I'm going to go with my heart instead of my head and think, Buffalo finally snaps their Super Bowl drought. And I always maintain FanDuel's traditional money lines, over-unders, and spreads. They are fun to play, but if you want to win some serious money, go with the parlays, props, and futures. You can parlay division winners like, say, the Eagles, the Chiefs, and the Steelers to have a shot at a nice payout. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now, because Future Days is today and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter, and we have an important request. Locked On wants to hear from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcast even better. And this is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. That's lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. And everyone who completes the survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. And hey, thanks for helping us out. All right. Everydayers, you know my stance. Wins and losses, they don't matter this season. Development does. Getting a sense of what could be, part of the next good team, getting a sense of those players. And that's happening. And developing them into viable 1.5 to 2 F4 players and more. That's what matters this season. Although it's really nice when the White Sox win, especially like they did last night. I mean, I'm not going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe the White Sox won. Ugh. Come on, lose as many games. And I've seen now the most recent, it was in the television broadcast too, but the most recent movement now is hoping the White Sox avoid another 100-loss season. Although it was the radio broadcast. I'm sorry. I was running some errands too last night. That was a big thing that Len Casper and Darren Jackson were really hammering home. Like, hey, if they can win this many games, they can avoid 100 losses. And now, for some, you can view that as a sign of progress. For others, that could still be a sign of, man, things are still really bad at 35th and Shields in the big picture. And I saw this on X, formerly Twitter. Ryan McGuffey of the Recap White Sox podcast, he tweeted this out at Ryan McGuffey, and I've got the tweet up for those watching on YouTube. Hashtag White Sox go 15-16 the rest of the way, and they finish 63-99. It's legit doable. And then John Greenberg of The Athletic, he replied, and this is at John_Greenberg. Man, this team is really falling on hard times when this is a relative goal. Okay. So again, you can look at it either as the glass half full or the glass half empty. To me, if the White Sox can avoid 100 losses, I do actually think that things are moving in the right direction. And I do think that there's nothing wrong with having that as a relative goal, because it means there's a chance to actually dig out from the rubble that was last season. I mean, think about it. That team cratered. The organization absolutely fell apart. I mean, it was an absolute train wreck. Everything was revealed about how messed up the White Sox got. I mean, how they just decayed and rotted. And if you can avoid 100 losses for the third straight season, I think you're moving in the right direction. And I would be all for it too, because I would love for the White Sox to have, 99 losses or even 95, for example. Let's get crazy, that type of stuff. Because it would be a huge win if the White Sox can avoid 100 losses and still finish at the top of the Tankathon standings. And right now, it's looking pretty good. Although right now, Fangraphs does project the White Sox to finish 61-101. That's still a 20-game win improvement from last year. And it would mean the White Sox are at least officially, back to baseball factory settings. Because remember, you're guaranteed to win 60. You're guaranteed to lose 60. It's what you do with the other 42 that matters, as the old saying goes. And it's looking pretty good, at least in terms of the projections, that the White Sox have a pretty good chance of finishing atop of the Tankathon standings. Because remember, the Rockies and the Nationals are not eligible for a top 9 pick this year or next year, per the wacky, stupid, MLB draft lottery rules. Like, I do think the Rockies deserve a shot at the lottery because it's not like they were purposely tanking. I mean, this team did spend some money. They signed Chris Bryant. They're just incompetent. And Chris Bryant got hurt. So I think you got to, there's got to be some context. Like, yes, if it was like the Cubs and the Orioles who were saying, yep, we're just trading everybody away and we're going to tank and we're going to try to get as many top 10 picks as possible, then yes, the rules should be there to prevent that. But if it's just you're stupid and incompetent, that's totally different than, tanking on purpose. Although the White Sox were stupid, incompetent, and technically cheap because Jerry Reinsdorf just didn't spend enough money. So first of all, you got to worry about with the Pirates. What are they doing potentially in the standings? Fangraphs projects the Pirates will finish 71-91. So that means the White Sox would still be at the top of the Tankathon standings by at least, my count, 8 games. So that's pretty good right there. And in terms of you don't actually have to worry about the Pirates because remember the top 2 teams at the top of the Tankathon standings get the best lottery odds. So as long as you finish 1 or 2 in terms of tankathon.com/MLB, you will have the best potential odds to land the top pick. What you got to worry about more is the Twins and the Braves. If, for some reason they just completely went on a tank and the White Sox won more than what we're even just hoping for. But potentially that we won't have to worry about that. The Twins are projected to finish 74-88 and the Braves are projected to finish 75-87. So finishing 63-99 would still secure the best lottery odds. And remember too, even the mitigating factor, you just want the White Sox to at least get a top 5 pick in next year's draft because there's about 5 hitters that are being projected to be potential superstar players. However, it would be nice to have the top pick just because you get more bonus pool money. You get more money to play around with. So you could go for the high ceiling guy that you might have to overslot, or again, you could do what the Nationals did. Take a still intriguing prospect, but maybe, spread your money around so you can grab some more higher ceiling prospects in the second, third, maybe fourth round. But the way I look at it too is finishing with 63 wins or more is more of that glass half full rather than glass half empty. Like, oh man, I can't believe they're aiming for 99 losses. Well, again, when you lose 121 games and you're being invoked to the 62 Mets and the 1916 Philadelphia A's, that is improvement. And the reason why it's a glass half full is they're doing better because they're establishing a young core to move forward with. Now, if it was 63 wins because, hey, the front office did grab some better veteran cover, yes, I would say, man, this speaks to the terrible state of the White Sox because there's no hope of them moving up. But they've got a young collection of talent that is proving they can move the White Sox forward. That has the arrow pointed up. You are getting very excited about where this team could potentially go. Well, it is Tuesday. I want to make sure your voice and questions are heard. That is why every Tuesday, I'm going to try to have a mailbag segment, and I got 3 mailbag questions I want to tackle after the break. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. This grape, ginger, and lime flavored shot brings the iconic taste of a golf course favorite to a non-alcoholic boost. Perfect for sinking birdies or making great memories with friends. It's a hole-in-one for your energy game. And whether you're out on the course or just need a little extra push to power through your day, 5-Hour Energy Transfusion delivers the clubhouse flavor you love without ever leaving the green. And I know I could have used a 5-Hour Energy Transfusion after walking 18 with my buddy back in the day when we were teenagers. I mean, we thought we were going to get this great deal to walk 18. Didn't realize, wow, this is a long course. Man, we were dragging on the back nine. Golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors. The grape ginger lime flavor of 5-Hour Energy Transfusion gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without leaving the course or chasing down the bev cart. And now you can amp up the fun even more. Just buy, snap, and enter for a chance to win a dream golf trip for two to any golf tournament in the USA. Tee up that trip. Visit 5hewin.com for full rules and entry. No purchase necessary. Excludes the Masters Tournament. Ends October 31st, 2025. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, or wherever they get their podcasts, as this show's available on all major podcast platforms. Well, I like how Drew Boggs suggested, hopefully I pronounced your last name there right, Drew, suggesting to me that I call this segment Talk You Off Tuesday. Maybe I might go with Talk to Me Tuesday, but either way, we're still, I'm thinking about it. We'll see next week. Again, keep sending me your mailbag questions. You can send them to lockdownwhitesox@gmail.com, or you can send them via Twitter at LockedOnSox, or you can put them in the show comments too. And I got 3 mailbag questions to dive in. And the first one is from the YouTube comments from yesterday's show. This is at 11bravo-go Sox. Do you think Elko can provide power for next year? Needs more than 62 at-bats for final evaluation of being a failure. Okay, so I agree that it was 67 at-bats that Tim Elko got. And I agree that that's a very short sample size to say, well, Tim Elko's a failure. And I hopefully haven't, made it seem like, oh, Tim Elko's a failure. I'm going with my hunch about why I'm thinking the organization is probably moving on with him, though. Why I think 67 at-bats might be what the organization thinks. First, I just think he's been passed by as even remotely being considered as a first base, long-term first base option the moment Curtis Mead was acquired. Mead has the higher pedigree. He's a former top 100 prospect. And also with Miguel Vargas and then Lenyn Sosa in the mix, even though Sosa is an awful defensive first baseman, I just don't see Elko being viewed now as nothing more than organizational depth by the front office. Remember, the front office took forever to even call him up. I mean, this guy was raking while Andrew Vaughn looked pathetic at the plate. And they still wouldn't call him up. So I just think that they're not so high on him. And remember, too, they demoted both Elko and Vaughn at the same time. And remember, too, guys, I was an Elko truther. And in the 26 games that he played, he did have, he did give off some vibes that, hey, maybe he could be something, especially in the advanced stats, like an 11.8% barrel percentage or 50% hard hit rate. But here's the problem. He had a 167 BABIP. I mean, that really makes you question, can he even consistently make contact in the big leagues? Because the fear is he would strike out a ton. And in those 67 at-bats, he had a 41.8 strikeout percentage. So I think, they always viewed him as organizational depth. And all the great AAA season did that he's having is just sort of force the front office to see him as maybe something more than what they thought. And then he gets the 67 at bats, and it basically reinforced probably what the organization thinks of him. Organizational depth. All right, this next one is from Brian. Hey, Todd, what do you think has been wrong with the Nationals over the last 6 years? They were really good for years and won the World Series in 2019. Then from 2020 to now, they are bad every year. What do you think went wrong? Well, first of all, thank you for the email there, Brian. And since Dave Martinez, the former Nationals manager, was a former White Sox player, and he was part of the rise and fall of the Nationals, I will always take Nationals questions. And I found this from the Capital News Service, and this is what they wrote. A pandemic, injuries, a lack of aggressiveness to acquire proven talent, sounds familiar, and the wait for young talent to form a new core doomed the post-title Washington club. Quote, they weren't doing any of the things that you have to do to become competitive in any kind of short to medium term time frame, said Michael Bauman, a writer for the baseball statistics and analysis site Fangraphs. They weren't drafting particularly well. They weren't developing particularly well. They weren't signing free agents, end quote. Sound familiar? Sounds like the 2022 White Sox. I also think they were just banking too much on Steven Strasburg instead of trying like everything possible to keep Juan Soto, to even dare to dream to be like, you know what, fine, here's $700 million. I think that was kind of what doomed them. All right, this one is from James. James writes, last week you brought up what the White Sox should do with Sosa. You said you said you didn't think he hit good enough to be the everyday DH. But what if the Sox treated him like the Red Sox did with Rafael Devers? And I'm not saying Sosa is Devers. And started spring training telling Sosa to put the glove and told him to only worry about hitting. I would like to think that you take the pressure off of being a bad fielder and spending every day only concerned with hitting, that maybe that's all that's needed to make him a good DH. Also, do you think that this offseason we'll see either Caro and Teal traded, since they both seem like they are worthy of being everyday catchers? And who out of the two would you rather see the team stay on the team? Again, thank you for the email. And to clarify, maybe I didn't communicate it well. I think for Sosa to be the everyday DH, I don't think he would be a bad DH. He just wouldn't be an ideal DH. Because ideally, if you're going to have a guy be your DH, and even then, most teams are going with a rotation. But if you want a guy to be, you're talking 150 games DH, then you ideally want that guy pounding out 25 to 35 home runs. You're talking 850 to 900 OPS, that type of thing. Where I think Sosa is going to be more of just a 20 homer guy, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't fit the ideal. And I also don't see him being any more than maybe 770 OPS, which is fine. But again, if you're talking about your designated hitter, the guy that you want to have 4 at-bats a game, you want more of a 130 WRC plus or 140 WRC plus, not kind of like league average. And I just think his inability to really take walks is always going to make him having to walk this fine line as a value hitter. Doesn't mean he's a bad hitter. It's just, again, a lot of teams are also now looking more and more for value hitting and guys that can, cause damage consistently. And for him to provide that value and cause damage consistently, he either has to provide it old school way, which is average, or he's got to slug over 400, which he's been doing. But it's a fine line, because if he has regression in both, then yes, you do have a guy who's not good enough to be your DH. And I don't think your proposal, though, is off base to tell him to go lose the glove, but it is, dependent on a few things. First, what does Curtis Mead do the rest of the season? Because if he proves that he belongs in the core, then yeah, I would rather have him and Vargas rotating at third and first. And then I also think, what does the front office evaluate Chase Maidroth after seeing him for a whole season? Do they view him as a long-term second baseman? Or do they view him more as a super sub? Is he just keeping the seat warm for maybe other guys that you have in the system, like Jacob Gonzalez, William Bergolla, Sam Altanachi, Terrell Perez? If they determine one of those prospects are worth a look and to compete with Maidroth, then yeah, you bury Sosa's glove. In terms of trading one of the catchers, I actually hope like heck they don't. I mean, I get it's one way to multiply an asset, and catching is gold, according to GM Chris Getz. But the Sox need stars on the next good team, and right now, those two have the potential to be stars. Now, will they be star catchers? That might be a difference. Star catcher is usually a guy who hits 250, 15 to 20 home runs, or is it a superstar like Cal Riley? And plus, with Teal's background of playing in the outfield in college, you can eventually maybe play him some left field once, Will Venables stops being stubborn, So if they're going to trade one of their young catchers, I think you trade Corey Lee. However, I don't think they're going to do that right now either, as Venable likes having him around, as you can see, to cover catcher in case you got a pinch run Carroll or Teal DHing that day. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. And I'll be back tomorrow with my weekly Way Back Wednesday segment. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding the dominant win last night. If trying to avoid 100 losses is a sign of improvement, or just how sad things are in the big picture, and your mailbag questions, you can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub, or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day. Talk to you tomorrow.